Hello viewers, in our earlier lessons we have discussed about the different methods of ADR in general. Today we are going to discuss about conciliation in India in detail. The objectives of this lesson are to explain the concept, meaning and definition of conciliation, to examine the legal framework provided for conciliation in India, to analyze the differences between conciliation, mediation and arbitration. A system of dispute resolution is indispensable for the smooth functioning of any society. It is necessary to resolve the disputes efficiently, effectively and equitably for the benefit of the parties and also the society at large. In the eyes of law, there are several ways in which a dispute can be settled, ranging from court litigation to methods of alternative dispute resolution. Some disputes can simply be negotiated, but others may require assistance of a third party for arriving at a solution. In order to have control over the process, choice of outcome, protect relationships, save time and money, parties prefer to settle their disputes out of court through consensual process of conciliation. Like mediation, conciliation is a voluntary, flexible, confidential and interest based process which provides for amicable settlement of dispute by an impartial, independent third party. Conciliation is suitable for all kinds of dispute, from petty family disputes to international commercial disputes, and it is one of the most sought after dispute resolution mechanism. Let us look at the meaning and definition of conciliation. The term conciliate is derived from the Latin term conciliare, which means to bring together, unite in feelings, make friendly. Even though the term conciliation is used in the statutes, it is not defined therein. According to Wharton's Law Lexicon, conciliation means settling of disputes without litigation. Conciliation is a process by which decision between parties is kept going through the participation of a conciliator. According to Halsbury's Laws of England, conciliation is a process of persuading parties to reach an agreement and is plainly not arbitration, nor is the chairman of a conciliation board an arbitrator. It can be understood that conciliation is a non-binding, consensual process in which the parties to a dispute appoint an impartial third party called the conciliator, who assists the parties in reaching at an amicable settlement of the dispute, keeping in consideration the utmost satisfaction of the parties. The conciliator hears both the parties and gives suggestions keeping in view the interests of the parties. However, the parties are not bound to accept suggestions put forth by the conciliator and can opt out at any stage. In India, the process of conciliation is presently governed by the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. But even prior to the Act of 1996, conciliation as a mode of dispute resolution is recognized under various statutes. Section 12 of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 contemplates settlement of disputes by conciliation through conciliation officers appointed under the Act. Section 23 of Hindu Marriage Act 1955 and Order 32A of Code of Civil Procedure 1908 enable the judge to effect settlement between the parties by recourse to conciliation. Family Courts Act 1984 promotes conciliation for speedy settlement of disputes relating to marriage and family matters. Legal Services Authorities Act 1987 encourages settlement of disputes by conciliation and provides for conciliation by permanent lok adalat. Section 89, Order 10, Rule 1A of CPC provide for reference of sub judice matters by court to conciliation with the consent of the parties. Further, in its 77th report on delay and arrears in trial court in 1978, the Law Commission recommended for conciliation in order to relieve the civil courts from the heavy load of pending cases. Now, we will examine how parties can approach to conciliation. The parties to a dispute can resort to conciliation either before approaching the court, that is pre-litigation, or after approaching the court, that is post-litigation. In pre-litigation conciliation, parties can resolve their dispute through conciliation privately without resorting to court litigation. Further, the parties can also go for conciliation administered by any institution like ICADR, ICA, etc. Post-litigation conciliation. In post-litigation conciliation, the parties may go for conciliation at any stage of the suit on their own accord without reference from court, or the court may refer the parties to conciliation. When the parties resort to conciliation without reference from court, then after settlement of the dispute, the parties may withdraw the case as settled or compromised. The court can refer the parties to conciliation as per the procedure laid down under Section 89, Order 10, Rule 1A of CPC, which shall be studied in the light of decisions of the Supreme Court in Salem Advocates Bar Association versus Union of India and Afcons Infrastructure Limited versus Cherian Varke Construction Company Private Limited. According to these, the court can refer the parties to conciliation only with the consent of all the parties. If the conciliation fails, then the adjudication of the case continues from the same stage where it was referred to conciliation. If the conciliation is successful, the settlement agreement will have to be placed before the court for recording it and disposal of the case on its terms. Let us now study the statutory framework provided for conciliation under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. The provisions relating to conciliation are enshrined under sections 61 to 81 of the Part 3 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 and are based on the UNCITRAL Conciliation Rules 1980. The main objective of these rules is to have an internationally harmonized set of rules for settlement of international commercial disputes through conciliation. Subsequently, the UNCITRAL Model Law on International Commercial Conciliation was framed in 2002 with the objective of establishment of a harmonized legal framework for the fair and efficient settlement of disputes arising in international commercial relations. We would be dealing with international commercial conciliation in another lesson. Let us now look at conciliation under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act in the different heads. Application and scope. Section 61, subclause 1 makes the Part 3 applicable to conciliation of disputes arising out of legal relationships, whether contractual or not, and to all proceedings relating thereto. Here, legal relationship means relationship which creates rights and duties between the parties that may either arise out of a contract or otherwise. Under a contract, the legal relationship of parties is defined. For instance, in a sale deed, a party is identified as vendor or vendee from the contract of sale. The non-contractual legal relationship can be classified as commercial and non-commercial. Issues like infringement of intellectual property rights, which are connected to trade, commerce and industry, can be categorized as non-contractual and commercial, as there is no formal contract in such issues, but the infringement gives the holder of intellectual property a right to claim damages. Issues arising from out of family relations and marriage like partition, quantum of maintenance, etc., can be categorized as non-contractual and non-commercial. The non-contractual disputes generally arise out of breach of a statutory obligation. Section 61, subclause 2 of the Act states that the provisions of Part 3 shall not apply to disputes which may not be submitted to conciliation by virtue of any law for the time being in force. Generally, all civil disputes which involve rights in personam are amenable to conciliation, but criminal offences and matters involving rights in rem like guardianship, declaration, divorce, testamentary matters, etc., cannot be conciliated. Commencement of conciliation. Section 62 of the Act provides that a party desiring conciliation may initiate the proceedings by sending a written invitation to the other party, identifying the subject matter of the dispute. The conciliation proceedings are deemed to commence upon the written acceptance of the other party. If the other party fails to reply within a period of 30 days, the party sending the invitation can take it as a rejection and shall inform the same to the other party in writing. Appointment of conciliators. Sections 63 and 64 of the Act deal with number of conciliators and procedure for their appointment. The parties may agree for appointment of 1, 2 or even 3 conciliators. In case of 2 conciliators, each of the parties may appoint 1, and the parties may also agree to appoint a third conciliator who would act as the presiding conciliator. Assistance of a suitable institution like ICADR, ICA or any other person can also be taken for the appointment of conciliators. Submission of statements, communication and disclosure. Section 65 permits the conciliator to request each party to submit a written statement describing the nature of the dispute and the issues involved. Each party is required to furnish a copy of the same to the other party. The conciliator may seek further information, additional submissions, documents or other evidence for clarification. Section 70 casts a duty upon the conciliator to disclose the information he receives from one party to the other party. But when a party gives any information requesting the same to be kept confidential, the conciliator shall not disclose the same to the other party. Section 69 provides for meetings and communications, oral or written, between the conciliator and the parties either jointly or separately. The proceedings may be held at a place as determined by the conciliator with consultation of the parties. It is important to note that as per section 66, the conciliator is not bound by the Code of Civil Procedure 1908 or the Indian Evidence Act 1872. Role of conciliator. Sections 67 and 80 statutorily lay down the role of a conciliator. It is provided that the conciliator shall act independently and impartially and shall assist the parties to reach an amicable settlement. The conciliator shall be guided by the principles of objectivity, fairness and justice and give due consideration to the rights and obligations of the parties, the usages of trade concerned, the circumstances surrounding the dispute, and also any previous business practices between the parties. The conciliator shall be guided by the principles of objectivity, fairness, and justice, and give due consideration to the rights and obligations of the parties, the usages of trade concerned, the circumstances surrounding the dispute, and also any previous business practices between the parties. The conciliator may conduct the proceedings taking into account circumstances of the case and wishes of the parties, including request for taking oral statements and need for speedy settlement of the dispute. At any stage of the proceedings, the conciliator may make proposals for a settlement, which need not be in writing and also need not be accompanied with reasons. The conciliator shall not act as arbitrator, representative, counsel, or witness of any of the parties in any arbitral or judicial proceedings relating to the dispute that has been the subject matter of conciliation proceedings, unless the parties agree for it. Apart from this, the qualities of a good conciliator may be enlisted as follows. A conciliator shall be cordial and friendly in dealing with the parties and give freedom to the parties to express their views and opinions. He should develop rapport with the parties and gain their trust and confidence. He should be unbiased, open-minded, and logical in thinking. He must control his emotions and act according to the situation. He should maintain confidentiality of the information. He should function as a communication link between the parties. He should reduce the friction, diffuse any heated arguments, and guide the parties towards problem solving approach. He should be a person of maturity and have full understanding about the interests and needs of the parties, and shall advise the parties for their utmost benefit. Further, under section 68, the conciliator or the parties may arrange for administrative assistance by any institution or person for the conduct of conciliation. Role of the parties. Section 71 states that the parties shall cooperate in good faith with the conciliator by providing written materials, evidence, and attending meetings. Further, section 72 provides that each party may on his own or at the initiative of the conciliator submit suggestions for the settlement of the dispute. However, the parties are not under an obligation to make offer of settlement. Settlement agreement. Sections 73 and 74 deal with the settlement agreement. Section 73 provides that where the conciliator is of the opinion that there exist elements of a settlement which may be acceptable to the parties, he shall formulate the terms of a possible settlement and submit them to the parties for their observations. After receiving the observations of the parties, the conciliator may reformulate the terms of a possible settlement in the light of such observations. If settlement is reached, the parties may draw up the settlement agreement either by themselves or with the assistance of the conciliator, and once such settlement agreement is signed by the parties, it becomes final and binding upon them. The conciliator shall then authenticate the settlement agreement and furnish a copy to each of the parties. Section 74 confers upon the settlement agreement the status and effect of an arbitral award as if it were an award on agreed terms rendered by an arbitral tribunal on the substance of the dispute under section 30 of the Act. As provided under section 36, an arbitral award is enforceable as decree of a civil court. Therefore, a conciliation settlement agreement is also enforceable as if it is a decree of a court. The Supreme Court in Mysore Cements versus Swedla Barmak held that a conciliation settlement in view of sections 74, 30 and 36 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act is analogous to a compromise agreement or consent order which is enforced by using the machinery of the court. However, it is pertinent to note that in Haresh Dayaram Thakur versus State of Maharashtra and others, the Supreme Court observed that it is essential that the requirements of section 73 shall be satisfied for a settlement agreement to gain the legal sanctity of an award as provided under section 74. Confidentiality. Section 75 provides for complete confidentiality of the conciliation proceedings and lays down a duty not only upon the conciliator, but also the parties to keep all matters relating to conciliation, including the conciliation agreement, as confidential. However, the settlement agreement may be disclosed for implementation or enforcement. Further, Section 81 mandates that the views expressed, suggestions or admissions or proposals made by the parties or the conciliator during the conciliation are inadmissible in evidence in any arbitral or judicial proceedings. Therefore, these provisions give freedom to the parties to express their views and suggestions, and also ensure that if conciliation fails, no party can take undue advantage of the information provided in conciliation in any judicial or arbitral proceedings which may be initiated subsequently. The Bombay High Court in Gajanan versus Raghurai Tamba, emphasizing on the importance of confidentiality, held that a conciliator cannot be called as a witness in views of section 80 and 81 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, and allowing such a practice would wholly undermine the effectiveness of the very mechanism. Termination of conciliation proceedings. Sections 76 deals with the termination of the conciliation proceedings. It provides that the proceedings terminate on the day of signing of final settlement agreement by the parties, on the day of written declaration by the conciliator that conciliation has failed, or on the day of written declaration by both parties or by one party that the conciliation is terminated. Costs and deposits. Section 78 and 79 deal with administrative matters such as costs and deposits. If the parties do not make payments contemplated under the section, the conciliator can suspend or terminate the proceedings until such time that the parties make payment. Resort to arbitration or court. Section 77 imposes a restriction on the parties that they shall not take recourse to arbitral or judicial proceedings in respect of the dispute which is subject matter of conciliation, except where such proceedings are necessary to preserve their rights. As such, applications can be made to court for interim orders to preserve property, secure the amount in dispute, interim injunction and appointment of a receiver, and for other measures of protection. Further, the Act does not provide that time taken in conciliation proceedings extends the period of limitation. As such, the parties, in order to avoid the suit to be barred by limitation, may file a suit even if the conciliation is pending. Now, let us look at conciliation and mediation. We have already examined the differences between mediation and conciliation in detail in our previous lessons. Further, the Article 1 of UNCITRAL Model Law on International Commercial Conciliation has given a very wide definition to conciliation as a process whether referred to by the expression conciliation, mediation or expression of similar import, whereby the parties request a third party or a panel of persons to assist them in an independent and impartial manner in an attempt to reach an amicable settlement of their dispute arising out of or relating to a contract or other legal relationships. Thus, it has done away with the technical difference between the mediation and conciliation in the international scenario. It should also be understood that all the advantages of mediation are available to conciliation, and apart from that, a conciliation settlement agreement is by itself executable as a decree of a court under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. Let us examine the differences between arbitration and conciliation. The main points of difference between arbitration and conciliation are: in case of arbitration, it is necessary to have a prior written agreement to submit disputes which have arisen or which may arise in future to arbitration, and the parties cannot refuse from going to arbitration. But the parties may resort to conciliation without the existence of any such prior agreement, and even if the parties incorporate the conciliation clauses in their agreements, conciliation would commence only if one party accepts the invitation of the other party to conciliate the dispute. Conciliation is a voluntary non-adjudicatory process, and the conciliator has no authority to impose solution on the parties, whereas the arbitrator renders award basing on the merits of the case, which is final and binding on the parties. The role of a conciliator is to help and assist the parties to reach an amicable settlement by formulating and reformulating the terms of a possible settlement, whereas the arbitrator adjudicates the dispute by determining the rights and liabilities of the parties and resolves the dispute by making an arbitral award. In conciliation, the conciliator authenticates the settlement agreement made by the parties, whereas the arbitral award is a judgment signed by the arbitrator. In case of conciliation, a party may require the conciliator to keep the factual information confidential and not to disclose it to the other party, but in arbitration, any information given by a party is subject to scrutiny by the other party. The conciliator is subject to certain disabilities as provided under section 80 of the Act, like he cannot be called as witness, cannot act as arbitrator or as a counsel of any party in arbitral or judicial proceedings, but an arbitrator is not subject to such disabilities. The arbitration proceedings or award may be used as evidence in any judicial proceedings, but conciliation proceedings cannot be used as evidence in any arbitral or judicial proceedings as they are strictly confidential. The conciliation proceedings may be terminated at any stage before signing of the settlement agreement by a written declaration, either unilaterally by one party or mutually by both the parties or by the conciliator, but arbitration proceedings cannot be terminated like this. In this lesson, we have discussed the concept and meaning of conciliation and examined the statutory mechanism provided for conciliation under Part 3 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. We have also analyzed the differences between arbitration and conciliation process, highlighting the distinctive features of conciliation. Hope you enjoyed this lesson. We will be dealing with arbitration in our coming lessons. Thank you.